So this is the first episode for the Tokyo Alumni podcast. Our first guest is an individual who graduated from St. Mary's International School in 2004. He attended Tulane University and upon graduation worked for JP Morgan as a broker. From 2015 to 2019, he worked for East West Consulting Company as the company's Senior Consultant and Strategist. In 2019, he left the company to start his own business, Tokyo Juice, a health-conscious organic juice bar located in Jingumae, Omotesando in Tokyo. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me.
So there's several things I want to talk with you about. But
Sure.
The first thing I want to talk with you about is upon graduating St. Mary's in 2004, I think the first big decision international school kids have to make is where they're going to head in the world. Are they going to go to Australia? Are they going to go to Bulgaria? Are they going to go to Canada? So what made you choose to go to Oregon first?
Well, my dad's actually from Oregon. He's from the countryside of Oregon. So we used to visit every summer and sometimes during the Christmas too. So I already had family there. And, when I was applying for universities, I really didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't really do a great job. I just kind of applied to a bunch of random places. And I had a college counselor that knew someone from actually the small university I went to was called Lewis and Clark College. And they were good friends and he introduced me. So, they persuaded me that it was a good place to go. It ranked pretty high for liberal arts school. And then, of course, when I asked my parents and family, they said, hey, it's in Oregon. You're in the neighborhood. I'm also the youngest of three boys. So they probably felt it was nice if I was somewhat close to some family. So that was the decision that was initially made to go to Lewis and Clark College in Oregon.
So when you were attending college, did you feel like your international background, especially being half American, half Japanese, was it easy for you to get integrated into the American system, or did you feel kind of like an outsider?
Good question. Yes and no. So actually Lewis and Clark, and the reason why I also transferred was that it was a very small liberal arts school. And it was really divided into three categories. There were the jocks, and then there were hippies. It's a very hippie school. And then there were people like me. There were kind of minorities there. So when I was there, it was, I didn't really fit into any of the three categories. I wasn't really a jock. And, these jocks there were also quite, I don't know what the right word was, but they weren't very global, right? They hadn't really gone out so much. And, in that kind of background experience, I felt like I didn't really fit in there. So coming from an international background, I felt like I was coming to something that was very domestic America. In that aspect, I didn't really like it. It wasn't, I was meeting a bunch of cool people from all over the US. It was just local, domestic American people, which I didn't feel so, comfortable. And also I didn't feel like I could utilize my experience and background.
Do you feel like your background at St. Mary's, I imagine there were also different cliques, different groups at St. Mary's. Do you feel like certain students, like a certain profile of a student at St. Mary's was able to sort of get acclimated better to the college system in comparison to others?
Definitely. And I think I'm one of them. To be honest with you, I think most people who came from St. Mary's, especially my grade, had a hard time getting acclimated with like the US colleges and just being surrounded by, non-Japanese or half people that, thought similar to them. So I think there's a lot of people that do have a difficult time. Some people end up coming back home. Some people end up really just kind of staying in small cliques. Maybe they found a Japanese community they can hang out with. And I didn't necessarily think that was a problem. For me, though, I always felt I was a little bit more American. So for me, it was no problem. Just Lewis and Clark, the crowd was just too different than what I thought. It was more like rednecks, So it wasn't that exciting. But no, definitely there's people who fit in more and vibe better in the US, and there's some people don't, even if they're half just like you and I.
So following Lewis and Clark, you move on to Tulane. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it was actually, I tell my dad all the time, it was one of the greatest decision or best decision in my life. I had applied to schools in the South, and I only applied to a few: University of Miami, University of Florida, Georgia Tech, Tulane. And I don't know why, but I just wanted to get away as far as I can, especially because I was so close to home on the US side. My brother went to USC, so he was on the West Coast. My oldest brother was going to school in Boston. So I just wanted to go somewhere else. So we kind of touched the four corners of the US. So I decided to move to Tulane. Actually, the year I went was a year after Katrina.
Hmm.
So it was quite a bit different because when I was applying, it was right before, it was during Katrina, I think, but I didn't know how bad the effects were. So when I made that move, it was the year after Katrina. But regardless, I went to somewhere that was totally different. They even say New Orleans or Louisiana is a totally different culture and city compared to other parts of the South. I didn't know what to expect, but I had a lot of fun. It was really cool. There was definitely a lot of personalities there, and it was one of the best decisions I made.
So you said New Orleans is very different from the rest of the South. What makes New Orleans so? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, by the way. Is it New Orleans? New Orleans?
People in New Orleans say Nolans.
So Nolans.
Yeah, but it's New Orleans, I guess. How does it make it different? When you go to the other parts of the South, for example, like Alabama and things like that, it's very country. It's just like, if you think of a typical college town, it's very boring. It's very heavy on football. It's just, you have a big campus, a lot of local bars and restaurants. That's about it. But, New Orleans had its own personality. Like, they had a lot of jazz. They had things like Jazz Fest. They had Mardi Gras. Jazz started in New Orleans. So, downtown in the French Quarter, they had a lot of exciting things that were always going on. The food was on its own too, right? You don't go to a city and have their own kind of food. You don't go to Atlanta and they have special food there. And same for like LA, right? But New Orleans had that. So it was really cool. And the people were very friendly. I just thought it was a really cool place that was like none other. So personally, I just thought it was somewhere that was very unique.
In defense of LA, though, the culinary culture or food in LA, you lived in LA a bit. Would you say it was superior, or would you say it was not as good as New Orleans?
Well, it's hard to say because the food in New Orleans originated basically in that area versus food in LA. A lot of it was maybe migrated or it came from a different area and they just kind of made it better, right? They perfected it. So if you compare it to that way, it's hard to say because LA has a lot of good food too. But the good thing was New Orleans, the price was about a third. So you get all the good food for a third of the price. And personally, I like casual dining, which everything there is quite casual versus LA is a little bit uptight.
Yeah, it does sound like an awesome town. I've never been, so maybe one day.
Yeah, one day. Just to visit's fine.
So following your university experience, and I have great personal interest in this as well, you moved on to be a broker at JP Morgan. So if you could maybe explain to us, what exactly does that job entail? And, what were some of the ups and downs being a broker for JP Morgan?
Yeah, actually, so one thing that a lot of people know is I cheated my way to getting to JP Morgan. And when I say that, I didn't use any alumni network or anything like that. It's kind of like if someone goes to community college and transfers to UC Berkeley, right? I went to a small boutique brokerage, got licensed, fully licensed, Series 7 and all that. And then I got all the training. Then I transferred to JP Morgan. So there was a 1 year where I was at a different brokerage firm right out of college. And then I joined JP Morgan, all in LA. And the job in JP Morgan was, so I first started as more like a private banker. And then I moved up, or a private broker, and then I slowly moved up to something what we call wholesaler. The job itself, to be honest with you, it's similar to any other sales job in a way. But for me, what was most exciting is I was always so engaged in the stock market. I loved it, partially because, I like gambling too, and it was more like sophisticated gambling. So for me, I was so engaged in this product that selling it or talking about it and also getting information from the JP Morgan, their HQ and their research team, also speaking with individuals who were high net worth that I would speak with. That really was exciting for me because I was learning a lot about them. I was learning a lot about what they went through, their background, how they accumulated wealth. And then I would be able to talk about some certain products or stocks, or a lot of things I sold were kind of packaged or proprietary products or derivatives. And I was able to understand how that works. So it made me really understand how the finance industry works, especially this was right after the financial crisis. So I understood how these products were developed and made, and what kind of benefits and also negative outcome they had. So that part was very exciting for me.
So you said this was right after the financial crisis, and I think what a lot of people who are, perhaps going to college now or recent graduates are thinking about is that when regards to occupation, how was it being in that financial sector during that time?
Well, it's very interesting because whatever I sold my clients, it went up. So I was at the worst time, and there was a lot of, the market was fluctuating quite a bit, more than I think now. And there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of talk about we're going to continue, it's going to be the worst recession. It was definitely really bad. But what I do know is whatever I did provide at that time went up. So, the most negative, it was one of the most, negative, or, it was a depressing time. But, it turned out that for me as a career, it actually helped me out. So, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Although it was hard because I was a young kid trying to convince older people, and I never went through any of these stock market crashes.
And then following your time at JP Morgan, you left and went to Japan. So what prompted this change? I mean, this was a huge change you had a good job, you're settled in California. What made you decide to go back to Tokyo?
Yeah, great question. So I love California, and maybe one day I do want to go back. And my job was good too. It was exciting. I made good money, and the first 3 to 4 years is tough, and I was just getting into like the fun times where I could work a little bit less. I was also on the sales side, right? I was an investment banker, so I would work shorter hours than investment bankers. I had a lot of fun, but the one thing I noticed was I wasn't really accumulating skill after a certain point. I became quite high to where I was a wholesaler. So I was selling to other banks or, bank branches where they would then sell to their retail customer. So I had a really fun job, but it wasn't something that I felt, it was kind of like the end of the road. I wasn't going to gain any more new skills. If anything, I was just going to sell more and make more money. At the same time, I saw a lot of people who had been in the business for 20, 30 years, and they're almost 50, 60. And it's true when you say like you see washed up bankers, they look pretty washed up. I felt like they have a good nest egg, but they wish they tried something else. For me, it wasn't something I wanted to settle. And then there was the other side where my parents live in Japan. They have this business. They always had asked me to come help them or be part of it a little bit. I also wanted to help them. I also missed them because I had been away at that time, almost 10 years from Japan. I missed my parents. Both my brothers were in the States. So I thought if I was going to live in Japan, this would be the last time. So that's where I decided to make the move.
So you make this move over to Japan. This is, I believe, 2015.
2015, January, like 4th or something. Yeah.
So you come back 2015, you start working at East West Consulting Company. So really not finance anymore. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about what type of work you did there, as well as a big question, I think, for a lot of international school students would be that work in the United States, and albeit they're two different companies, versus the work in Tokyo. So what were maybe the prominent differences you saw, as well as just going back to that original question of what did you do at East West?
So what did I do at East West? Basically, I did 3 things. I was a recruiter like everyone else. So I would try to find executives for me, it was foreign-based and it was both foreign-based and Japanese companies. They would be looking for like a manager, maybe a CFO or something. So I would go and find those people. So that was one part of my job. Another part was I was training and also helping a little bit with the hiring of new people who joined East West. The last part was kind of working with my mom about the company's strategy, where we can go, just kind of giving insight from a somewhat outside perspective, because I was away for so long, and kind of what related to the next question about how things were done in the US and how we could maybe enhance our business here. So those are the three things I was doing. In terms of the difference, the company culture at East West is quite international. It's very similar to an American company, so it's fine. But for me, it was really difficult working with Japanese companies or even foreign companies who had a lot of Japanese people who would be my counterpart. The difference was basically a difference in culture, right? In the US, you can go aggressive, hard sales. And if you have a good product, it'll sell itself. In Japan, a good product really doesn't mean anything. It's more about your professionalism, your relationship. You can have a terrible product, but a great relationship, and they'll always count on you. So this is what I had to get used to, and it took some time because I didn't understand why. It didn't make sense. And I also felt like I kept chasing people with empty promises. They would give me empty promises. I would keep chasing them, and that wasn't something I really enjoyed.
So you were saying how your company was international, and that's fine. So are you inferring that maybe you knew people who were working at Japanese companies and they were with similar backgrounds as you, being international, and they were maybe struggling adapting to Japanese culture, even though they went to school in Tokyo?
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, there's a few that definitely did better than the others, but yeah, they would definitely struggle because one, we went to international school, but keigo was never our thing, right? And suddenly that applies when you're in a Japanese company. At the same time,
Sorry,
I feel like,
but can you explain quickly, just for viewers who maybe do not speak Japanese, what keigo is?
well, it's just the highest level and the most polite level of speaking to, it could be your elder or speaking to business professionals. So it's just it's also a mannerism too, right? So that's something that you really have to, I don't want to say practice, but you really have to be comfortable speaking it or used to speaking it versus someone that suddenly was super casual with everything and now has to be extremely polite. For example, if someone never said ma'am or sir and suddenly had to do it every time, they're going to mess up a few times, right?
So did you have any episodes of where you failed to use keigo and that resulted in any problems?
The best thing is because the way I look, no one even thought I can speak Japanese. So when I would go in there and speak Japanese, that was good enough. However, I would have problems over the phone because sometimes they would think I'm rude because they don't know, they don't see me, right? I'm just speaking Japanese. So no, there's times that I felt like the other side wasn't too happy, but it usually wasn't a big deal or happened very few and far in between.
That's really interesting. So when you flew in, so we've spoken a bit about the occupational differences, the on-job aspect. Outside of work, how did life in Tokyo compare to life in the United States, or specifically California?
I love Japan, I love Tokyo, but it just doesn't compare to California. And also the way things are done here was really bothering me, or the accessibility of certain things. So I'm going to list a bunch of things that's different. Besides the bad things, I'm going to start with some of the good things, which for me is I take safety for granted when I'm in Japan. That's a huge thing that didn't really hit me because I was born and raised in Japan. And then I don't know, I just kind of got lucky even I was in New Orleans and LA. But that's one thing that really kind of gets me is the way I feel safe. I really take that for granted. So there's that part. Now, the thing about Japan, a few things that personally bothers me, I don't know about other people, but for me is now I'm in the food business, right? And I'm really into very healthy or organic or grass-fed options. And those options actually don't really exist in Japan, or it's very hard to get. So that bothers me because if you really want to get something, sometimes in Japan you can't get it. And I don't know why. I think a lot of it's controlled too, but that's the first part. The second part would be like using Japan used to have to use your seal, personal seal. So things like that, opening up a bank account, you need a seal. Or, for example, I have my own business now. I still have to go to the bank to make deposits because it's cheaper than doing it online at my house.
Wow.
Yeah, so these things I feel like Japan needs to catch up, and it does bother me. Another small thing would be I wish they would had a little bit more outdoor dining and drinking places, because basically LA was nice weather and I had that a lot. I missed that too. So there's a few more, but life in Japan is it's easy to. It's a lot of things are accessible in terms of like getting places, but very inaccessible when you need something particular. And then sometimes the people are a little bit more difficult, but don't get me wrong, LA has some difficult people too.
I'm sure they do. And you brushed upon your current occupation. So after working at East West for 4 years, you moved on to start your own company,
Yes.
Tokyo Juice. Has it been around for a year now, or?
Yeah. So I established the company 2018 October, but the business itself didn't start till May of 2019.
Okay, so actually just reached a year very recently.
Yeah. So we had our 1 year. We kind of had a nice celebration at the shop. It was really fun.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
So a few questions about being an entrepreneur in Japan.
Okay.
I imagine there were a lot of obstacles to establishing the business in the first place, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are thinking they want to start their own business. So what would be advice you would give towards someone who's trying to start their own business, and what type of pointers would you give out?
In Japan or just in general?
In Japan specifically.
I see. Well, first of all, Japan, I think, is a great place to start a business, because although it's there are some obstacles, it's a very unsaturated market for anything. For any business, it's so unsaturated, besides tapioca, actually. It's very unsaturated. And I think any business, you have an opportunity to be successful here. Just because I feel like Japan was, for so long, this whole thing about you join one company and you stay till the end, right? Yes. You join a famous, prestigious company, you stay all the way until you retire. Because of that, I feel there's a lot of businesses that never got started, so there's a great opportunity for that. So there is that part. Some of the obstacles, to be honest with you, I didn't have as many obstacles as I thought I would. Just because I actually never started my own business. So this was my first experience. So I couldn't really compare it with anything else, right? I couldn't really compare with a business in the US and so forth. But one thing that was hard, that comes back to what I had mentioned in East West, was I didn't have any relationships with a lot of people, right? I had enough to get started, but there's some relationships, like, for example, my vegetable supplier, I was working with a lot of small farmers, and we had great relationships, and I built that before starting the business, which is one advice I would give, is you definitely want to, have relationships, or, have partnerships, or just be able to have some kind of people that can help you before you start your business. So I did have that, but in terms of something even bigger, like someone that's going to design your store, or a big supplier that's going to send you daily vegetables, or someone that's going to help with establishing your business in Japan. These things, it's hard to find someone that, if you don't know someone that could introduce you, it's back to, if you don't have a relationship, it's going to be very difficult. And that was hard, because I would actually be banging on doors, knocking on doors, going to like these marketplaces for vegetables, just introducing myself. And it was really hard work doing that, because they would a lot of them would just turn you away. So
a lot of footwork was involved, a lot of personal.
I think any business requires footwork, but I just felt like it required a extra layer of footwork.
That's really interesting. If I recall, when you started Tokyo Juice, some of the sort of motivation to get into the whole juice business went beyond just a business incentive, but part of it was also your personal experience with health and well-being.
Yeah, totally. So before leaving East West in about 2017, near the end of 2017, I had kind of a health crisis. I didn't have anything super serious like cancer or anything like that, but I basically broke out in eczema, which I never had before, maybe because I was living in LA. It covered almost my entire body. I was constantly constipated. I would get migraines on a monthly basis. I had a hard time getting up. I just felt really, really lethargic. I would go to the doctors. They really didn't have an answer. They also would only prescribe me steroids when I would have, some rashes and things like that. So, it got to a point, it was really scary. My wife was scared for me too. And I did, I would listen to podcasts and did a lot of research, and it came down to your food and diet. And my diet in Japan wasn't that healthy. I never ate, convenience store food or fast food, but I would eat Japanese fast food, ramen, pork cutlet, tonkatsu, and things like that. And I got carried away because, in my head, I kept on thinking, well, it's healthier than a hamburger or something. So that led me into getting really sick. And then I started, juicing, drinking vegetable juice. I first started eating salads, but that was a little bit too much. I was eating too much salad. My jaw started hurting. It was just too much. I was like a rabbit. So then I switched to juicing, and that basically within 2 weeks, I started seeing improvements in everything. My bowel movement, my skin. So it really led me to believing this product. And I always wanted to start my own business, but I never knew what. So it was perfect for me. It was a product I believed, I loved, saved my life. And then I wanted to start a business, and back to Japan being unsaturated. This was something I kind of knew before just by living here. I thought, this is a perfect timing. At the same time, East West was just kind of helping. It wasn't something I wanted to do for a long time either. It was a good experience. I helped my parents, but it just wasn't my thing. So this was a perfect timing. Everything kind of fell into place.
So if I'm not mistaken, you and your wife both own the Tokyo Juice.
Yes, my wife and I started together, and she does as much work as I do.
Or maybe she does more, but I guess we'll have to ask her about that sometime.
Yeah, you better ask her. Sometimes, not all the time.
So while we're on the topic of your wife, your wife is a non-Japanese national, yet you guys live in Japan. So I think a lot of people have international marriages, or they're simply, you're obviously, not obviously, but you're from your parents have an international marriage, and you have two passports. So pretty much any marriage you're in is an international marriage.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
But definitely this one, where you live in Japan with a non-Japanese spouse. So what would you say are some of the challenges having a non-Japanese spouse living in Tokyo?
Well, first of all, I have to do everything. So that's a challenge. A mail comes and we're not there, so we get this like absent slip, and then I have to call every time, so the person comes back, right? So the challenge was, not only do I have to do everything where I'm already quite busy, also it was very hard for me before we started this business to see her being, she had a career. That career kind of, she had to leave that career coming to Japan. She was helping at East West at my parents' company for a little bit. And then finally she started teaching yoga, and she was very happy about it. But at the end of the day, and actually that kind of goes back to what you asked me about what was difficult about doing business in Japan is, there's no international mindset, which also adds to there's no English, right? So she was really stuck here with trying to learn Japanese, but the level of Japanese that's required is very high, even if she wants to teach yoga at like Gold's Gym. So it was very difficult for her to really have a lifestyle here. And then it was more like me taking care of her in small areas. So actually that made it very difficult. And that actually had us thinking many times, maybe we should go back to the States, but that's all before we started Tokyo Juice.
And in the long run, do you guys see yourself in Japan? Do you see yourself in the US? Do you see yourself maybe even somewhere else than those two places?
Yeah, I mean, I would only consider living in the US, and maybe I would consider somewhere else too. But um, for now, we're going to be in Japan, and that's mainly because our business is based in Japan. Who knows what's going to happen? I do want to live or reside in California long term, so eventually I do want to go back. But as for now, the time being, I'll be here in Japan.
Can you tell us a bit more about this business you started?
Yeah, totally. So, like I was saying, I was juicing, and that made me feel much better. So, it was a product that I really believed in, and it was a product that it's all over Europe and the U.S. You go to Whole Foods, there's like a juice bar. You go to health food store, there's a juice bar. But Japan didn't have any of that. The juices they had were not vegetable-based juice. They're more fruit-based, if anything, or they still use dairy. So I really wanted to start a juice bar that was predominantly vegetable based, predominantly organic, and I wanted it to be affordable as well as trying to be sustainable and all that. So my wife and I started this juice bar because we felt there was no good juice bar. This is a great opportunity. And, I felt like there was a lot of people who were in my position that were having a hard time, and they're too busy, so they don't have time to eat vegetables, and vegetables are very expensive in Japan, so they choose not to buy it, but buy something else that's cheaper and unhealthy. And I really felt there was a lot of people, especially when you're on the train, you might notice a lot of people with bad skin or people who don't look, in good condition. And that led me to opening up a juice bar that was predominantly vegetable-based pressed juice. And we do a lot of vegan smoothies, so using almond milk and cashew milk.
So this, obviously becoming a vegan, being a vegetarian, that seems to be on the rise in the States. Would you say in Japan, this trend is starting to catch on, or it hasn't caught on yet? I haven't been to Japan for about a year now, but I don't know too many vegans.
Yeah, it's totally caught on to Japan. There's so many vegan or vegetarian spots that's popping up, but actually a lot of them are closing too because they don't really differentiate from other vegan spots. And there's still a handful of people that do it. And at the end, vegetarian food or vegan food in Japan is quite expensive, so they do have that trend. Just to be clear, I'm actually neither vegetarian or vegan. It's just that my juice bar offers smoothies and treats that are vegan and gluten free. So, we're a vegan shop because we don't use, dairy, cow's milk and things like that. But, we're a juice bar, so it's a little bit easier. But personally, I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian.
I've been told by a lot of people to eat kale, and I have no idea what. I mean, I know it's looks green. Could you tell me a little bit about kale? Do you guys serve kale at your Tokyo Juice?
Yeah, I love kale. The kale, they say it's a superfood. And one reason they say is they have a very high amount of vitamin C. I think they have a lot of iron too. And there was a chart once I saw that had 2 kale leaves was equal to 40 tomatoes or something crazy like that.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, the point is it's very high in nutrients. And also, it's actually one of the most pesticide used greens. And actually the reason I think that's the case is because even bugs, even insects, they know what a healthy food is and they go for it.
That's really
so they use a lot of pesticides, but for us we want to keep it organic. So the healthiest stuff, kale, spinach, these things, we always get them organic.
So it's been about a year since you guys opened up Tokyo Juice. Would you mind sharing with us, maybe after having this store for a year, what are some of the major take homes in regards to, entrepreneurship and having your own business in Tokyo?
So what I noticed was it was the hardest thing I ever done in my life. Finance initially was hard, but this doesn't compare. The amount of responsibility, the amount of work just to make sometimes minimum wage, it's been quite tough. And the few things I would say is you definitely need to make friends and definitely need to learn to trust people and have partnerships, because this is something I can't do by myself. I don't think most people can do business by themselves. They always have a partner. You also, you have skills in certain areas that other people have in their areas. So you definitely need a partnership to really help you. And for me, that was my wife. I also had partnership, with people who were helping me, like my parents and things like that. But basically, you definitely need someone that can help you and have your back, because there's some days that's really, really tough. It also, what I noticed is, once you first start your business, you really don't know what you're doing a lot of times. You make some mistakes, which is okay. You're trying to find out what kind of characteristic or personality your business has. But I think that's something that after your 1 year, you have to kind of figure out, so you can, just extend on that and really diversify. You're noticed because you're different from other business that's similar or somewhat similar to you.
So now that you're done with year one, what would you say is your primary goal for year 2, 3, or even year 10? What is the next step for Tokyo Juice?
So we want to do a few things right now, and we have a few ideas in plan too. So one is, retail customers are great. They walk in, they take Instagram pictures, they promote you. It's good, but they're a little bit inconsistent sometimes, weather, Corona. So what we want to do is we want to enhance our corporate business, right? We want to be able to, deliver juice to them. We also want to do this new thing where we would have smoothie kits where they can make smoothies at their office. That's already pre-packaged with the ingredients.
Oh, wow.
So they just blend it at their office. We also want to do it at the people's house, send it to people's house as well. So we can work more online business that way. We want to get into sustainability more. So maybe we can look at being able to, find sustainable products that we could distribute in Japan. We want to do that. And then, of course, we want to open up a few more shops because we have one shop that's quite successful. And if we can have multiple shops in different areas that's successful, that would be awesome. So not in any order, but,
Yeah.
That
sounds like a lot's going on basically for you guys, and expanding your corporate clientele, maybe a second, third store. Sounds like a lot of things are going on. So, thanks for being the very first guest to this Tokyo Alumni podcast. It seems like New Orleans has good food. You can fake your way to becoming a banker. You need a great partner to succeed in business, and good juice gives you good skin and helps you poop.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So as we sort of part here, I want to give it back to you at the end here for about, really however long you want. But if you want to maybe share with the audience anything else you guys are working on and whatnot, I want to give you the floor. And again, I am very grateful for you for being part of it.
No, the pleasure is mine. So yeah, I don't know. I guess a few things I just want to say would be that, and I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but I started Tokyo Juice because I really went through something. So I really believe in my product. And I think believing in your product is, and maybe many people will say, of course, but I think it's the single most important thing, right? Because a lot of people start business just to start business, or maybe they have a good idea, or they heard of a good idea, or they get into something that they feel like they could make money because everyone else is doing it. I don't know, like real estate. And that's not bad. But when times are tough, if you don't believe in your product, it's going to be very difficult. And there has been a lot of tough times. Like you start your business, you have no idea how people are going to react. You have no idea how you're going to get business. So you really feel like, am I doing the right thing? Did I just, give up my whole career? And I had a lot of doubts. And, even some days I have doubts too when things aren't going well. But when you believe in your product, no matter what, long term it's going to be fine because it helped you so much that there's no way it won't help other people. So I think you really have to believe in your product. And if you believe in your product and you want to be an entrepreneur or start your business, I think that's the golden ticket. You're going to be successful. With that being said, this is Tokyo Juice. This is a small bottle we sell. This is what we send to corporates, or we try to be sustainable. We try to minimize plastic, but some things are difficult. But please come visit us. We're located near Omotesando and Jingumae Station. It's like a 7-minute walk from Omotesando. Come by. We're open every day. We're open from 8:30 on the weekdays, weekends from 10 o'clock. So if you're there, I'm usually there still grinding away, usually in the morning. So, please come by and say hi.
Well, thank you, Jeff, again for being the first guest to this podcast. And have a good day.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. Appreciate it.
At this point.
Yeah, totally.